Today, I'll tell you a story so haunting it left an entire frontier holding its breath, in the heart of a snow-covered Wild West where danger lurks behind every tree. This is a place where grief and fate cross paths, and where enemies can become the only ones you can trust. It all started when a wounded Apache collapsed at a widow's door, a single moment that unlocked a deadly truth and a trail of blood. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Arizona Territory, 1868. Silence had become Lirien Wren's only true companion. 2 long years of it stretched across the endless desert, broken only by the lonely cry of wind slipping through the ponderosa pines that ringed her remote cabin. She welcomed that quiet. Silence never lied. Silence never stole the people she loved. The winter wind swept over the plateau as Lirien fed another log into the fire. Her once soft hands were now rough and scarred from a life built on survival. The small cabin she had raised with her husband Edrinvale now felt far too big, hollow with memories. Yet it was all she had left in this world. Outside, the first flakes of early snow dusted the rocks and scrub. Lirien drew her shawl tighter, then froze. A heavy thump struck the door, then another. Her hand flew to the rifle, always waiting by the entrance. 2 years alone in Apache territory had taught her one truth: trust only your instincts. She crossed the wooden floor in silence and took position behind the door, weapon steady. "Who's out there?" she called, keeping her voice calm despite the thunder in her chest. No reply. Only a wet, dragging sound against the wood. Lirien's jaw tightened. Maybe a mountain lion, wounded and desperate. She had faced worse. With practiced control, she eased the door open just enough to look outside, rifle leading the way. What she saw made the blood drain from her face. A man. No, something far more dangerous. A wounded Apache warrior lay collapsed on her threshold, blood soaking into the fresh snow beneath him. Long black hair clung to his face, twisted with pain, yet even broken, he radiated a terrifying strength that felt far too familiar. Lirien's finger trembled on the trigger. This was her chance. One pull, and she could avenge Edrin, avenge the life stolen from her by men who looked just like him. The warrior's eyes opened, dark, piercing, cutting straight through her defenses. He spoke. His voice was low and clear, untouched by accent. "Either shoot me or help me, woman. The snow is falling fast." Lirien tightened her grip. "Get off my land," she hissed. "I don't help your kind." A crooked smile touched his lips. "My kind? And what kind is that?" "Murderer." Even wounded, he pushed himself up slightly, smearing blood across her doorframe. "I have killed men, like any soldier in any war," he said, "but never the innocent." "Liar!" She shoved the rifle closer. He didn't flinch. "The men who killed your husband, they weren't mine." Ice filled her veins. "How could you know that?" "The abandoned homestead 3 miles east," he said weakly. "Your name carved above the door. Everyone knows what happened there." His breath grew shallow. "I was tracking the killers when they did this to me." "Get out!" Lirien snapped, trying to force the door shut, but his body blocked it. "I won't die on your doorstep." With the last of his strength, he braced his arm against the door. Blood seeped through his buckskin shirt where bullets had torn into him. "Fight me if you want," he whispered, eyes locked onto hers. "I'm staying." Her blood boiled. She should let him die. Yet something in his gaze, no begging, no fear, only quiet knowing, held her frozen. "The cavalry will come," he slurred. "They won't care who's who if they find me here. Choose." Against every instinct, Lirien lowered the rifle. She had seen enough death. "Try anything," she warned, "and I'll finish what those bullets started." She dragged him inside, her touch cold and distant. Every time her skin brushed his, a strange heat flared through her, something she refused to name. Cutting away his torn shirt, she saw the truth written across his body. Scars from bullets, blades, and fire. A man shaped by war. "You have a name?" she asked. "Theros," he said softly. "It means the one they fear." Lirien stiffened. Even she had heard that name whispered in terror at the trading post. Theros, the most feared Apache war leader alive, a ghost who left no survivors. And now he was bleeding on her floor. Here he was, bleeding on her floor. "Why the hell did you come here?" Lirien Wren snapped, hands trembling as she went back to tending his wounds. "Because," Theros murmured, his voice thinning as the dark began to take him again, "I knew you'd be strong enough to either save me or kill me." His eyes shut. The room fell still. Snow kept falling outside, covering his trail, along with any chance of turning this back. Night brought the fever. His skin burned beneath Lirien's calloused hands as she tried to dig out the second bullet lodged near his shoulder. She wasn't a doctor, just a woman who'd patched herself up too many times to count. Broken bones, knife cuts, fevers treated with roots and boiled leaves. "Hold still," she muttered, though he wasn't hearing anything now. His lips moved in Apache, soft, desperate, maybe prayers, maybe ghosts. Now and then English slipped through, orders barked to warriors, tense talks with army men, and once words so gentle they chilled her, like they were meant for a child or a woman. When the second slug finally came free, Lirien fell back on her heels, breathing hard. Why the hell was she doing this? Letting nature finish the job would have made more sense. Let the storm take him. Let the blood run cold. But no. There she was, dabbing sweat from the brow of the man whose people had burned her life to the ground. Then his eyes flew open, sharp, fever-glazed, but burning with purpose. His hand lashed out and locked around her wrist. "They're coming," he rasped. She jerked back. "No one's coming. Your tracks are gone. You're safe." "Not for me," he croaked. "For you." A chill sank into her bones, worse than the storm outside. "The men who took your husband," he whispered. "They've been watching. Your cabin. You." Her breath hitched. "How the hell do you know about that day?" His grip loosened, but his stare stayed fixed. "You weren't home when it happened. Your husband, he died guarding something, and they think you still have it." She ripped her arm free. "You're raving." "The stone," he said, fading again. "Blue, from the sacred mountain. They think it's here." Before she could demand more, his eyes closed. He was gone to the fever again, leaving Lirien staring into a storm of questions. A stone? Edrin had never spoken of any damn stone. But now her feet moved on their own, carrying her to the cupboard where she kept the few things he'd left behind. A memory stirred. Edrin coming home from a hunt a week before the raid, quiet as a shadow, hiding something in his saddlebag. "It's better if you don't know," he'd whispered. "Just a bit of luck I found." She hadn't thought much of it then. He always brought home strange rocks. But now... From a small box holding his pocket watch and their rings, she pulled a worn leather pouch. She hadn't opened it since the funeral. Inside, a polished turquoise stone, the size of a robin's egg, streaked with deep blue veins. She'd kept it for no reason other than it was his. But if Theros was right... The wind screamed through the shutters. Lirien jumped and shoved the stone back in its hiding place. She swept toward the window. Snow came down hard now, thick and blinding. If someone was out there, they wouldn't get far unseen. She turned back to him. In sleep, with the pain smoothed out, Theros looked younger, maybe 30. His face held both sharpness and sorrow. What turned a man into someone the whole territory feared? What had he lost? "Who are you really?" she whispered. As if hearing her, his hand stirred, settling over the leather thong around his neck. Curiosity got the better of her. She gently opened the pouch tied at his throat. No stone, just a carved wooden charm and a lock of black hair bound with sinew. The sight pierced her. He carried loss, too, just like she did. For the first time, Lirien Wren looked at Theros not as the enemy, but as a man carved by grief. It scared her more than she cared to admit. She moved back to the fire, rifle across her lap, spine stiff in the chair. She wouldn't sleep tonight. Couldn't. The wind howled and the storm raged. Somewhere out there, danger waited. She'd survived 2 long winters in this wild land, buried her husband, buried her dreams. But now an Apache war chief lay wounded in her home, dragging with him a secret about the day her life was shattered. And something else far more dangerous, a feeling she didn't want to name. Dawn couldn't come fast enough. Morning light crept through the cabin window, slanting shadows across the floorboards. Lirien hadn't slept. Her back ached from holding vigil, her eyes stung from watching every breath Theros drew. To her surprise, his color was better. He was still here, still breathing, still dangerous. The fever had broken just before dawn. His breathing had settled, slow and steady. Apache resilience, maybe, or just plain hard-headed will. Lirien Wren moved quietly through the dim light, checking the wounds. The bleeding had stopped. Infection was still a threat, but the angry red swelling around the bullet holes was already fading. As her fingers adjusted the bandages, she felt it again. That strange, unwelcome warmth rising up her arm and settling heavy in her chest. She pulled her hand back fast, shaken by her own reaction. "Your touch heals," came his voice, low but clear, startling her more than it should have. His eyes were open now, focused and sharp, far too alert for a man who'd been knocking at death's door just hours ago. Lirien straightened her spine. "You shouldn't be awake." A faint smile played on Tharos's lips. "Already disappointing you, are we?" "I need answers," she said flatly, ignoring his attempt at charm. "You mentioned a blue stone last night," she continued, "and men watching my cabin." His face changed. The ease vanished. He winced as he shifted, trying to sit up. She hesitated, then reluctantly helped him brace against the wall. "How long have you been living out here alone?" he asked, eyes drifting over the small cabin. "That's not an answer," she said sharply. "It matters," he insisted. "The men who killed your husband, they weren't after him. They were after something they believed he found, something that never belonged to them." She crossed her arms. "And how would an Apache war chief know what happened to a white settler?" A flicker of something, maybe hurt, maybe anger, passed over his face before he masked it again. "I'm Chiricahua. My people have lived in these mountains long before yours even dreamed of them. We know when evil walks the land, no matter what skin it wears." His voice was steady, but it carried the weight of history. "The men who came here," he continued, "they weren't Apache, and they sure as hell weren't honest white men. They were army deserters, scum who tortured my people to learn the secrets of sacred ground. One of them was once an officer, their leader." He paused. Name was Garen Vane. Lirien's stomach dropped. She'd heard that name whispered at the trading post. Major Garen Vane, disgraced and vanished after brutal acts against Apache captives. Word was he'd formed a rogue outfit, mercenaries for hire, slipping across borders like ghosts. "What would someone like that want with a stone?" she asked, steadying her voice. "Not just any stone," Theros said, eyes locked on hers. "A piece of turquoise from Zilnaudali, the Mountain of Prayers." "To my people, it's sacred," he continued. "But to men like Vayne, it's a map. They believe the veins in that stone mimic the rivers that lead to hidden gold." She went still. Her thoughts jumped to the leather pouch in her cabinet, the blue stone she'd nearly forgotten. Could that little thing really lead to gold? "My husband wasn't a thief," she said quietly. "He didn't care about treasure." "Maybe he found it by accident," Theros said. "Or maybe someone planted it on him. Either way, Vayne's men think you know where the rest is now." She met his gaze, her voice sharp. "And you? Why were you hunting them? Revenge? Or to protect some sacred relic?" A shadow darkened his face. "Both." "They came to my village when I was away," he said. His voice cracked, just barely. "My wife and son didn't survive." The blow landed deep. Lirien remembered the lock of hair, the murmured words from his fevered sleep. This man, the one everyone feared, had been a husband, a father. "I'm sorry," she said. The words felt small, but honest. Theros looked away. "As am I, for your loss." Silence settled between them. It wasn't empty. It was heavy, dense with pain neither of them wanted to name. Finally, Lirien spoke. "You said you wouldn't leave, said you had to protect me." "I knew you were being watched," he said, eyes steady. 2 days ago, I saw Vayne's scouts near your cabin. I killed one. The other got away. That's how I got these." He gestured at the bandaged wounds. "They'll be back, more of them, once the snow clears." "So you came here to use me as bait," she snapped. "No," he said sharply, eyes flaring. "I came to warn you. Getting wounded made that harder than I planned." Before either could say more, a sound cut through the stillness, a distant whinny, carried clear on the frozen air. They froze. Someone was out there, and the storm was no longer their only threat. In a heartbeat, the quiet of the cabin shifted into something taut and dangerous. Theros forced himself upright, teeth gritted against the pain, while Lirien Wren crept toward the window, staying low as she peered through the frost-rimmed glass. "One rider," she murmured, squinting against the glare of sunlit snow. "Coming in from the east, civilian clothes but riding like a soldier." Theros's expression darkened. "Scout. Probably checking if the storm's cleared, or if I'm still breathing." Lirien grabbed her rifle and checked the chamber. "If he sees chimney smoke and doesn't see you moving around, he'll know something's wrong," Theros warned. "They know you're out here alone." Her thoughts raced. If the rider belonged to Garen Vayne, she couldn't risk him returning with intel. But she couldn't just shoot someone without knowing for sure. "I need to look like nothing's changed," she muttered. "Like any other morning." Theros gave a short nod. "And I'll stay out of sight." Their eyes locked, a wordless agreement passing between them. Whatever tension simmered beneath the surface, distrust, grief, that strange electricity neither wanted to name, they now stood on the same side. "Stay hidden," she whispered, stepping toward the door. "If this turns bad," she began. "It won't," he cut her off. His voice was iron. "You're tougher than they think. That's why you're still here." The words anchored her more than she expected. With one last breath, Lirien stepped outside into the blinding brightness of morning. The storm had passed, leaving the world glistening white. The rider was still a ways off, picking his way through the snow. She moved deliberately, fetching water from the well, checking the woodpile. Routine movements, the kind any frontier widow might make after a storm. But her ears were sharp, her posture poised, every motion calculated to keep the rifle within reach just inside the door. As the rider drew closer, she saw him clearer. A young man, scruffy beard, wearing a patchwork of worn civilian layers and old military gear. His right hand hovered too close to his holstered sidearm. At 50 yards, he called out, "Hello, the cabin." Lirien straightened, lifting a hand to shield her eyes as if surprised. "Hello there," she replied, voice calm. "Begging your pardon, ma'am," he said, slowing his horse. "Got caught up in that blizzard yesterday. Been riding blind since dawn. Saw your smoke and figured you might have coffee. And a sense of direction." His grin was all teeth, but his eyes never stopped flicking between her and the door behind her. "Of course," she said with a matching fake smile. "Always happy to help a lost traveler, though I'm afraid I'm not much company. Been on my own since my husband passed." He dismounted, but kept a respectable distance. "Sorry to hear it, ma'am. Been long?" 2 years come spring," she answered, backing towards the door. "Go on, tie your horse and warm up inside." As he led the horse to the hitching post, Lirien ducked inside, heart thudding like hooves on hardpan. Theros was already gone, hidden somewhere in the cabin's dark corners. The room looked untouched. A voice came from the storage nook, hushed and close. "Keep him talking. See what he knows." She gave the smallest nod. Then the door creaked open. The stranger stepped in, hat in hand like he was about to propose. "Mighty kind of you, ma'am. Name's Fenric Blade." The lie was clumsy, hanging in the air like smoke. "Lirien Wren," she replied smoothly, turning toward the stove. "Coffee's nearly ready." Blade hovered near the fire, rubbing his hands dramatically, but his eyes scanned everything with cold calculation. They landed, too long, on the blood-stained cloths she'd forgotten. Then shifted to the pallet Theros had slept on. "Live far from neighbors, Miss Wren?" he asked casually. "Far enough," she said, still facing the cups. "Nearest homestead's maybe 3 miles, and they cleared out months ago." He hummed. "Rough land out here for a woman alone. Between the Indians and the outlaws?" "I manage," she replied, handing him a cup. But when she turned, he wasn't by the fire anymore. He was slowly circling the room, fingers brushing her things like he owned them. "Your husband leave you well off?" he asked, his voice slipping from polite to probing. "Just this place and what's in it," she said flatly. "Ain't much of worth to anyone but me." His gaze drifted to the small cabinet, where the blue stone was hidden. "Sometimes folks don't realize what they've got," he said. "Could be worth letting someone take a closer look at your husband's things. For your benefit, of course." The smile he offered didn't hide the menace. The threat was clear. "My husband's things are private," she said coolly, her voice like steel scraped across stone. "And I'd say your coffee's getting cold, Fenric Blade." The words landed sharp. Something ugly twisted across his face, and his hand slid toward his gun. "That ain't very welcoming, Lirien Wren, especially after I rode all this way just to see you." Before she could reach for her own weapon, a shadow peeled away from the corner of the room. In one smooth motion, Theros was behind him, a blade pressed to Blade's throat. "I'd think that over," Theros said quietly, the edge drawing a thin line of blood as Blade went rigid. "Not just any Apache," Lirien said, lifting her rifle with a steady calm she didn't feel. "You're staring at Theros himself." Fear flooded Blade's eyes. "That's not possible. He wouldn't protect a white woman?" Theros finished for him. "You understand far less than you think." The knife dug in a fraction more. "Now talk. How many ride with Garen Vane, and when do they come?" For a heartbeat, it looked like he might refuse. Then Theros tightened his grip. and whatever Blade saw in his eyes broke him. 15, he choked. Vane sent me ahead to see if the woman was still here and alone. They're camped 10 miles east, waiting on my signal. If I don't show by nightfall, they'll ride anyway. And the stone? Theros pressed. What does Vane know? Blade's gaze flicked to Lirien, then back. He knows her husband found it near the sacred mountain. Says it matches the map his Apache guide drew before he died. Claims it leads to more gold than any man could spend. The rest? Lirien cut in. There's more than one piece. Blade nodded as much as the blade allowed. Vane already has one. He needs at least one more to finish the map. Said the husband might have hidden it somewhere on this land. Theros and Lirien exchanged a look. If Vane already held part of it, the danger was worse than they'd thought. What does he plan for the woman? Theros asked, though the answer was written in his eyes. Silence told them everything. I thought so, Theros said softly. That's why you won't be leaving. Terror flared in Blade's face. Wait, I can help. Vane don't trust me. Keeps me scouting 'cause I'm expendable. I could feed him bad information, buy you time. Lie again, Theros cut him off, and your death will be slower. His gaze dropped to the man's belt. That knife's army issue. But those notches, 7 of them. You're no reluctant scout. You're a killer. Blade snarled, his mask finally gone. And what about you, Indian? I've heard the stories. Ranches burned, settlers butchered. I've killed warriors in battle, Theros replied evenly. Never women, never children. Can you say the same? The silence that followed was answer enough. Lirien stepped closer, rifle steady on his chest. You've got a choice, Fenric Blade. You die right here, or you ride back with a message. Theros shot her a warning look, but she didn't stop. Tell Garen Vane I know exactly what he's hunting. Tell him I'll trade the stone for my life, and the deed to this land. Tell him to come alone at noon tomorrow, or I destroy what he wants. Blade's eyes narrowed. And why would he believe you? Because you'll give him this. Lirien reached into her pocket and produced a small turquoise shard, snapped from the original stone that morning. Insurance she never thought she'd need so soon. Proof. The pressure of Theros's blade eased just a hair. Blade stared at the fragment like a starving man. Vane doesn't negotiate. Once he knows you have it, he'll come anyway. He will, Lirien said, but now we choose when and where. Blade's gaze flicked between them. The great Theros protectin' a white woman. What would your warriors say? Something dark flared in Theros's eyes. She stands against those who've wronged both our peoples. That makes her worthy of protection. The way he said it, so certain, so still, sent a flicker of warmth through Lirien Wren's chest. Not trust. Not yet. But something close. Maybe recognition. And that was enough to make her press forward. Will you carry our message? She asked. Or do we finish this here? Fenric Blade's instinct for survival finally won out over his spite. I'll carry it. But don't fool yourself. Garen Vane won't come alone, letter or not. We're counting on that, Lirien replied, sounding steadier than she felt. A few minutes later, they stood at the window and watched Blade disappear into the white distance, a sliver of turquoise tucked in his pocket alongside the message that could end or ignite it all. As his silhouette vanished into the snow-blind horizon, the weight of what they'd done settled over them. He'll bring them all, murmured Theros, leaning hard against the wall, every breath drawing pain across his face. I know, said Lirien, helping him back to the bedroll despite his stubbornness. But now we've bought ourselves till noon tomorrow, instead of getting slaughtered tonight. Theros studied her with a look so sharp it made her uneasy. You surprise me, Lirien Wren. Most would have run. "There's nowhere to run," she answered simply. "This cabin's all that's left to me." She paused. "And I won't hand it over to men like Garen Vane." "Even if it costs your life?" he asked. She looked away, and the words tumbled out before she could stop them. "My life ended the day they killed Edron. What's left is just surviving, maybe making them pay for it." The confession hung there, raw and honest. Theros reached out, his fingers brushing hers, just once. A gesture that didn't need words. "Tomorrow," he said low, "we do more than survive." For the first time in 2 long years, Lirien felt something move inside her. Something not grief or rage, not quite hope, but purpose. And when her eyes met Theros's again, it was clear neither of them expected to make it past tomorrow's reckoning. They were already ghosts. She, a widow clinging to fragments of love. He, a warrior who had lost everything that once gave him a reason to fight. Now only one thing remained, making damn sure their enemies joined them in the grave. But even as that grim resolve settled between them, something else stirred. A flicker of connection neither had asked for, born of shared scars and the unspoken recognition of a kindred spirit. Dangerous. Unwanted. But undeniably there. "Rest," she told him quietly, breaking the moment. "You'll need your strength." She turned away to begin preparing for the battle to come, but she could feel his eyes on her, seeing more than she wanted, understanding things about her she barely understood herself. Outside, the winter sun burned across the snow like fire on alabaster. Brilliant, beautiful, and merciless. By this time tomorrow, that pure white ground would be stained red. Hers, Theros's, Vane's. It didn't matter. Only that the right men bled for what was taken. As dusk fell heavy over the cabin, Lirien glanced over at Theros seated by the fire, quietly cleaning his blade. Every motion precise. Efficient. The practiced ritual of a man who had faced death too many times to flinch. Though wounded bad enough to keep most men on the floor, he'd spent the day helping her turn the cabin into a stronghold, shifting furniture for barricades, rigging tripwires in the snow, marking escape paths, sharpening weapons. They'd moved together like they'd done it 100 times before, reading each other's thoughts, filling in each other's gaps. She knew the land. He knew Garen Vane's tactics. Between the two of them, maybe, just maybe, they stood a sliver of a chance. "You should eat," she said, breaking the long silence. Theros didn't look up, but gave a short nod. The blade glinted in the firelight as he tested the edge with his thumb. Lirien turned to the pot and ladled out 2 bowls of stew. They'd been quiet most of the evening, moving with a kind of unspoken rhythm. Now she handed him a bowl. Their fingers brushed again, and again, that strange warmth. This time she didn't pull away so fast. They ate in silence, broken only by the fire's soft crackle and the lonesome howl of a distant coyote. Questions churned inside her, but she hesitated to ask, afraid speaking them aloud might break whatever fragile trust had begun to form. Finally, it was Theros who broke the quiet. "You want to know why Garen Vane chases this stone like it's life itself?" It wasn't a question. She met his eyes. Those quiet, steady eyes that always seemed to see too much. "Idren never mentioned anything valuable," she said slowly. "He didn't care about gold. We came here to build a life, not chase some legend." Theros set his empty bowl down, voice low. "The turquoise from Zilna Udili holds meaning to my people, not for what it contains, but what it connects. Earth, sky, spirit." He paused. "But men like Vane?" He shook his head. "All they see is what's buried." Gold, she said quietly. More than gold, Tharos replied. That mountain hides a vein unlike any this land's ever seen. It's pure, plentiful, if you know where to look. Tharos's voice dropped, shadowed by something ancient. My people discovered it generations ago, but they chose to bury the truth. They feared what such riches would bring. He turned towards the window, moving stiffly from his wounds, watching as night crept over the pines. They were right to be afraid, he muttered. Garen Vane learned about it back when he ran Fort Bowie, interrogated half-starved prisoners until one finally broke and told him about the turquoise map. The way he said interrogated made Lirien Wren's stomach churn. She didn't need the details. She could see them behind his eyes. That stone, he continued, was split into 3 pieces long ago, each guarded by a different line. One Vane already has. He took it off the corpse of an elder he murdered. His jaw clenched. The second? Tharos glanced her way. Hidden near your husband's old hunting grounds. Her chest tightened. And the third? She asked. Tharos finally turned to face her fully. His voice grew low. It was my wife's family who protected it. Lirien's breath caught. That's what he was after, she whispered, when he destroyed your village. He nodded grimly. He killed them for a piece of turquoise. For where it would lead, Tharos corrected. The difference was thin as thread, but it mattered. He paused. His voice dipped further. She died protecting it, took the secret with her. He swallowed. And our son was only 4 winters old. Lirien felt the blow like a kick to the ribs. This man, this ghostly figure feared across the territory, this whisper in settler nightmares, this myth of vengeance, stood here stripped bare by memory. And she didn't know what came over her, but she crossed the room, laid her hand gently on his arm. I'm sorry, she said. Tharos looked down at her hand, then up into her eyes. His gaze locked onto hers with such raw intensity that it stole the breath from her throat. As am I, for your husband. The words came quiet, but they struck like thunder. Something passed between them then, something wordless, deeper than sorrow, older than trust. Wounds recognizing wounds. Suddenly she realized how close they stood, how warm his skin felt under her touch. How long it had been since she touched someone out of anything but necessity. She pulled her hand back fast. We should finish getting ready. If Tharos noticed the tremor in her voice, he gave no sign. He moved instead to where his meager belongings were stacked by the pallet. There's something you should have, he said, unwrapping a small bundle of soft deerskin. Curiosity beat back hesitation. She accepted it carefully and pulled back the leather. Inside was a blade unlike any she'd seen. Short, curved like a crescent moon, with a braided leather grip that fit snug in the hand. It's called a karambit, he said. Came from far across the sea. A trader brought it here long ago. You hold it like this. He curled his fingers around it, blade curving out like a claw. Doesn't take much strength to make it count, and it hides easy. Lirien turned it in her hand, surprised by the weight, by how natural it felt despite its odd shape. Why give this to me? Tharos didn't hesitate. Because tomorrow your rifle might not be enough. He paused. And because, if I fall, I won't see you left defenseless. His voice wasn't dramatic, just quiet, honest, and it hit her harder than she liked. This man, this so-called monster, was preparing to die with the same calm focus he brought to every action. No panic, no fear, just dignity. I'm not defenseless, she said, but she still tucked the blade into her boot. And you're not falling tomorrow." For the first time, a ghost of a smile touched Tharos's mouth. Now who's certain of what she can't control? She surprised herself by answering with a smile of her own, shaky, uncertain, but real. It felt unfamiliar, like stretching a muscle she'd long forgotten she had. Then, snap! A branch cracked outside. In an instant, both of them moved, Tharos sliding to the window, Lirien grabbing her rifle from beside the hearth. "There." He pointed into the darkness beyond the tree line. She followed his gaze, caught the outline of a man, still as stone, watching. Crawford wouldn't have gotten Blade's message yet. "Not Crawford," Tharos agreed. "One of his scouts. The first never came back fast enough, so now he watches to see what happened." "What do we do?" He was silent for a breath. "Let him watch. Let him think this cabin holds only a woman alone, settling down for the night." Lirien understood right away. So he tells them everything's normal, that nothing strange happened. Exactly. It'll keep them from changing the plan. Might buy us time. Together, they moved with calm precision, blowing out all but one lamp, shuffling the room to erase any trace of Tharos's presence. Lirien moved as if it were any ordinary night, tending the kettle, shutting the shutters, walking the floor like routine ruled her life. All the while, she kept the figure in her sights. Tharos melted into the shadows like mist, still and silent as stone. But she never stopped feeling him there. Hours seemed to stretch like days, and then, finally, the shadow slipped back into the woods. "Is he gone?" Lirien Wren asked quietly. Tharos seemed to appear beside her like smoke, so silent she flinched before she saw him. "He's heading back to report to Garen Vane," he murmured. "Think he saw enough to keep them on their course?" "We'll find out come morning." He returned to the window, eyes scanning the shadows beyond the tree line. "You should get some rest," he said without turning. "I'll keep watch tonight." Lirien shook her head. "You're the one still bleeding. You need the sleep more than I do." "The wounds are healing." He paused. "And I don't need as much sleep as you'd think." "All the same," she insisted, voice firm. "We'll take turns. 4 hours each. I'll go first." Tharos studied her for a beat, then nodded once, accepting the truce. "Wake me at midnight." He eased himself onto the pallet near the fire, while Lirien settled in at the window, her rifle laid across her lap like a trusted companion. Outside, the night stretched quiet and vast, stars scattered bright above the pine tops. Her thoughts drifted to Idren Vale. What would he think of her now, partnering with a man once called the terror of the frontier? Would he understand? Or see it as a betrayal of everything they'd believed in when they first built their life out here? A voice drifted from the firelight. "He was a good man." Lirien turned, surprised to see Tharos still awake, watching her with those unreadable eyes. "How could you know that?" she asked. "I saw him, more than once, from afar." At her stunned look, he continued. "We watch everyone who enters our land. Your husband hunted with restraint, took only what he needed, left tobacco offerings after every kill." He nodded slowly. "That's the mark of a man with honor." The thought that Tharos had been nearby all those years, silently observing, unsettled her. But somehow it comforted her too. That he, of all people, had weighed Edrin's soul and found it good, brought an ache to her chest. "Were you watching the day it happened?" The question she hadn't dared ask anyone else finally rose to the surface. Tharos's face hardened. "No. I came 3 days later. I was tracking Vane's men for different reasons." He hesitated. "Your husband fought like a wolf cornered. He did not fall easy." Tears burned the edges of Lirien's eyes. No one had ever told her how it ended. She'd come home from the fort to a cabin soaked in silence and death. Did he suffer? The words escaped before she could stop them. Theros held her gaze. He died protecting what he loved. Not quite an answer, but perhaps the only one that wouldn't break her. She nodded, accepting both what was said and what was spared. Then, softly, "And your wife?" Her voice barely carried. "Your son?" A flicker of pain crossed Theros's face before he tucked it away behind iron control. "Senekai died as a warrior should, shielding our son with her last breath." His throat tightened. "Kioran, they found him under the firs. She'd hidden him there." The weight of it knocked the wind from Lirien's chest. Not just names, lives. People cherished, ripped away by the same senseless brutality that took Edrin. "Vayne will pay." Her voice was steel, not a threat, a vow. Theros looked at her long and quiet. "But vengeance won't bring them back." "I know," she said, "but justice might help them rest." He repeated the word slowly, as if tasting it. "Justice, is that what we ride toward tomorrow?" He let the question hang between them. "Or is it just blood?" No answer came. Eventually, Theros closed his eyes. "Wake me at midnight." Then, after a pause, "Lirien Wren?" "Yes?" "Your husband would be proud of the woman you've become." The words sank deep, touching places in her that had been frozen for too long. Outside, the forest held its breath, and somewhere beyond the trees, Garen Vayne's men crept toward the cabin. But for the first time in years, Lirien didn't feel alone. Midnight came too fast. She sat by the fire, reluctant to stir him. Watched the steady rise and fall of his chest. His features, so often carved in stone, were now softened in sleep. When her hand reached out, almost brushing a lock of hair from his brow, she froze. Pulled back quickly, startled by the impulse. "Theros," she called gently, keeping distance. "It's time." He woke in a breath, every muscle alert. Years of danger etched into his reflexes. As they passed each other in the cabin, their hands touched. Just for a second. And it was there again, that heat, that hum beneath the skin. He felt it too. She knew it by the flicker in his eyes. By the way he paused. He moved to the window. "Sleep," he said. His voice rasped a little more than usual. "Dawn's coming." She laid down where he'd been. The blanket was still warm from his body. Her mind raced through what might await at first light, but sleep came anyway, dragging her under. And her last thought before drifting off was that the pillow smelled like him. She could still smell him. Smoke, cedar, and something distinctly Theros. And oddly, it brought her peace. For the first time in months, Lirien Wren dreamed of Edrin Vale, not of the blood-stained day he died, but of life. His laugh echoing through the timbers as he raised their cabin beam by beam, his hands steady on hers as he showed her how to aim down a rifle's barrel with calm precision. In the dream, he stood at the rim of a canyon, pointing toward something just out of reach. "It was never about the turquoise, Lirien," he said, voice distant, almost wind-borne. "It was always about finding a way home." She jerked awake, breath shallow, to find pale dawn light creeping through the window slats, and Theros kneeling at her side, one hand on her shoulder. "They're coming," he said simply. The dream vanished, torn away by reality's sharp teeth. She stood fast, brushed the sleep from her eyes, and strode to the window. Through the thinning trees along the eastern ridge, she counted a dozen riders threading their way in, cloaked in the silver hush of morning. "Earlier than we thought," she muttered, steady despite the fear curling low in her gut. Garen Vane was never planning to honor his word, Theros said as he checked his bow, knives, and rifle with the practiced ease of a seasoned predator. We didn't expect him to. Their eyes met. No need for more words. This storm had been coming long before either of them had known the other's name. Maybe it began when Edrin found that piece of turquoise. Maybe it began when Senekai refused to give up its secret. Maybe it was just fate. "You ready?" Theros asked, offering the rifle he'd prepped for her. Lirien took it, feeling the cold steel settle into her grip like it belonged there. "I am." He nodded once, respect in his eyes. "Then let's meet our enemies, Lirien Wren, side by side." As the riders emerged into the clearing, a strange calm washed over her. 2 long years of pain, solitude, and rage had led to this moment, standing with a man she should have hated, and yet couldn't. She would stand. She would fight, and maybe, just maybe, she'd finally do right by what she and Edrin lost. 15 men spread out at the tree line, just out of range. Garen Vane was easy to spot. Tall, stiff-backed, gray-bearded, still wearing his former rank like a second skin. The kind of man who could order executions over breakfast and feel nothing but mild inconvenience. "They're thinking it through," Theros murmured from the side window. "Vane smells a trap." "Good," Lirien said, checking her rifle once more. "Let him wonder." They'd spent the last few hours readying the ground. Deadfalls where brush could conceal them, rifles stashed for reach, false silhouettes placed just so. Theros's wounds still slowed him some, but his movements were like smoke, silent, sure, and deadly. He was still the warrior whispered about across the frontier. "2 coming forward," Theros reported. "The rest are circling to surround us." The original plan, to let her meet Vane alone, was off the table now. He was coming in loaded and ready to burn the place down. "Change of plan," she said. "We pull them in, hit hard, then punch through the east side, before they close the noose." It was reckless, but better than dying slow in a ring of fire. The 2 riders approached. One was Fenric Blade, the scout from yesterday, smirking like he already saw her blood on the ground. The other, a cold-eyed kid wearing a stripped-down cavalry coat, looked just as deadly. "Mrs. Wren," Blade called out when they were about 30 yards out. "Major Vane requests your company to renegotiate our little arrangement." Lirien glanced at Theros, now a shadow in the corner, ready to strike. She raised her voice, sharp as a whip crack. "If he wants to talk, he can walk that horse over here himself. I don't deal with middlemen." The young officer wheeled his horse and galloped back, but Blade stayed, his hand tapping the pistol at his side like a warning. "He's coming," Theros said quietly, "and he'll want inside. He's after the stone." "Let him come," Lirien muttered. A few minutes later, Garen Vane arrived, riding tall on a massive black stallion, flanked by Blade and 2 other brutes. His presence was undeniable, grizzled, cruel, commanding. She could picture him dragging confessions from men with his gaze alone. "Mrs. Wren," he called out. His voice held the clipped polish of East Coast schooling, now hollow with contempt. "I believe you're in possession of something that belongs to me." Lirien stepped into the doorway. Her rifle rested in her hands, casual but ready. "You're mistaken," she said evenly. "There's nothing here that ever did." "This land's mine now," Garen Vane said smoothly, his eyes raking over the cabin. "And you can't possibly defend it alone." He paused, counting the odds in his head like it was already settled. "I'm offering you safe passage back to the nearest settlement. No bloodshed. All I ask in return is what your husband stole from me." "Edrin never took anything from you," Lirien Wren shot back, voice edged in fire. He was an honest man, more than you'll ever be. Vane's expression sharpened, the last thread of pretense vanishing. The blue stone, Mrs. Wren. I know you've got it. Your man Blade brought me your message, and your little sample. He raised an eyebrow. I came as requested, though I notice you started the party a bit early. You brought 15 armed men, Lirien said coldly, rifle at her side. That doesn't look much like good faith to me. Dangerous territory, Vane replied smoothly, stepping down from his horse with the grace of a man half his age. Now shall we settle this inside, like civilized folk? Or do you want to stand out here and let things get ugly? It was bait, of course. He wanted inside to search for the stone, and to get her alone. But Lirien knew this might also be her only shot to end him before his men could react. Fine, she said, stepping back from the door. You come alone. Your men stay put. Vane flashed a tight-lipped smile and handed his reins to Fenric Blade. Won't be long, he told them, striding towards the cabin with confidence carved into every step. As he stepped through the doorway, Lirien noticed something glinting at his throat, a shard of turquoise hanging from a leather cord, barely visible beneath his collar. The door shut behind him. His eyes swept the room, cataloging every corner with military precision, looking for signs of traps or hidden relics. His gaze caught on the bloodied cloth Lirien had left draped in plain sight. You're not alone, he said flatly, hand drifting toward his holster. No, came a calm voice from behind. She's not. Vane whirled, fast for his age. But Theros was faster. He stepped out of the shadows with a knife in hand, planting himself between Vane and the exit. The firelight caught his face, hard lines and steady eyes. Theros, Vane breathed, half in disbelief. My men swore they killed you. Your men lied, Theros said evenly. As do you, Vane. The former major relaxed slightly, raising his hands from his weapon. Well, this is unexpected, he said with a smirk. The great Theros throwing his lot in with a white woman? Times sure are changing. We stand for what's ours, Lirien said fiercely, rifle aimed straight at his chest. And for the blood you spilled. Something shifted in Vane's expression as his eyes flicked between them. Calculating. Watching. So you've compared notes, he murmured. Found a common enemy. Then he turned to Theros. Tell me, does she know the whole truth about your wife? Does she know why I really came to your village that day? Theros didn't flinch, but something behind his eyes darkened. Lirien could feel the tension coil in the room like a rattler ready to strike. Your lies won't save you, she said. No lies, Vane replied coolly. Just truths he never shared. He turned slightly, speaking low, deliberate. Like the fact your wife wasn't Apache at all, but a settler's daughter. A white woman who chose your bed over her own kind. The words hit Lirien like a gut punch. She turned toward Theros, but he said nothing. His silence was answer enough. Senekai was my wife, he said at last, voice restrained like a blade held tight. Her people were mine. That's what matters. Not to her father, Vane cut in, pouncing. He paid me well to retrieve her, and the boy. Called it rescuing them from a savage's hands. Lies, Theros said, but his voice held a new weight. Branneth Quaid disowned her the moment she chose my people. He'd never have sent for her. Maybe not while he lived, Vane conceded, stepping closer. But dying men tend to want closure. He wanted to see the boy before he passed, offer him the inheritance that was rightfully his. Lirien looked at Theros, saw the flicker of something behind his stoic mask. Doubt, maybe. Pain. Don't listen to him, she said sharply. He's trying to tear us apart. Vane's eyes slid to her. "And you, Mrs. Wren, has your Apache friend told you what your husband really found that day? Why he truly died?" "The stone," Lirien said firmly. "Nothing else." "Oh, it was more than turquoise," Vane replied. "He found the boy, Tharos's son, alive, hidden in the canyons after our raid." The world seemed to tilt sideways. She turned slowly toward Tharos. He was stone still, emotionless, unreadable, a mask carved from grief and war. "My son died in our village," Tharos said, each word a blade. "By your hand." "A child died," Vane said, unmoved. "But not your boy. A decoy. One your wife left behind while she fled with the real one." "She was a clever one, your Senekai," Vane sneered. "Damn near pulled it off." For a fleeting moment, Tharos's face cracked open, grief and longing flooding through his hardened features. Lirien Wren felt her heart seize at the sight. "If you're playing me again, then ask your new friend," Vena interrupted smoothly, gesturing toward her. "Ask her what her husband was really doing with that blue stone. Ask about the cave, where he was hiding the boy." Lirien shook her head, confused. Her suspicion gave way to sheer disbelief. "Edrin never spoke of a child," she said. "He found the stone while tracking deer. That's all he said." "No," Vane said, voice coiled tight with malice. "It was payment, from your Senekai to your husband, for keeping her son hidden until she could come back for him." His eyes narrowed. "But your Edren got greedy, started poking around, asking questions about why this chunk of turquoise was worth dying over. That's when my men caught up with him." It sounded insane, completely unhinged. Yet a part of Lirien couldn't push it aside. Edren had been acting different before he died. Quiet, secretive, slipping away to the eastern canyons, giving half-truths when she asked. "If my son is alive," Tharos spoke, each word stiff and trembling with restraint. "Then where is he?" Vane's grin was ice. "That's why I need the stone, isn't it? To finish the map. The boy's with what's left of your people, buried somewhere deep in the canyons beyond the sacred mountain. Find one, you find the other." For a breathless second, Lirien feared Tharos might actually consider it. Stone for the boy. Hope for blood. She saw the war behind his eyes. "Tharos," she whispered, "he's lying. You know he is." The Apache's eyes found hers, and in them, not just pain or fury, but doubt. Did she know? Had Idrin hidden the truth even from her? Before she could answer, a shout cracked through the silence, followed by the sharp crack of a rifle. "Time's up," Vane said flatly, already moving for his pistol. Everything erupted. Tharos lunged as Vane's gun cleared leather. Lirien fired, her shot missing as Vane twisted to avoid it. The ex-major's revolver roared twice, wood splintering near her head as Tharos slammed him to the ground. They crashed hard, grappling like animals, one forged in military command, the other in survival and fury. Despite the pain in his body, Tharos overpowered him, pinning Vane down, knife poised for the kill. "Wait," Vane gasped. "Your son lives. Kill me and you'll never see him again." Tharos faltered, and that heartbeat of hesitation was all it took. Vane surged, shoulder driving up and over. They rolled, locked in a brutal scramble, neither gaining clear control. Outside, more gunfire lit the air. Lirien steadied her rifle, eyes locked on the men, but they were too close, too tangled to risk a shot. The door slammed open. Fenric Blade burst in, revolver raised. Without pause, Lirien swung and fired. Blade dropped where he stood, dead before his body hit the floor. But the moment cost her. She spun back, but it was too late. Vane stood now, bleeding from a savage cut across his cheek. He gripped his pistol, aimed straight at Theros's skull. The Apache warrior knelt, dazed, blood trailing down his temple. "Drop it, Mrs. Wren," Vane growled, "or watch your savage die right now." Lirien stood firm, rifle steady. She could hit him, but not fast enough to stop him from pulling the trigger. "He's using you," Vane hissed, "just like he used your husband. The mighty Theros doesn't care about settlers. He's killed more than you could count. He's only here because he thinks you'll lead him to his son." "That's a lie," Theros said, voice strained but unwavering. "Lirien, don't believe him." Vane struck him across the face with the butt of his pistol. "Silence!" The gunfire outside surged louder. Someone else was out there, fighting Vane's men. But who? They had no allies, no backup. Then Theros's eyes lit with sudden fire, understanding blooming behind his pain. "Apache," he breathed, a fierce pride rising in his voice. "My warriors have come." Vane's face darkened. "It changes nothing." He turned to Lirien, eyes sharp. "Give me the stone, now, or he dies, and you go next." Lirien's mind raced. The Apaches were outside, real help. But none of it mattered if she couldn't drop Vane before he fired, and his gun was still pressed to Theros's head. "The stone ain't here," Lirien said flatly. "I lied. It's hidden, and I'm the only one who knows where." "Then you're taking me to it," Garen Vane growled, his voice sharp as broken glass. "Now move!" Across the room, Theros locked eyes with her. No words, just a silent understanding. Stall. Wait for the moment. "It's not that simple," Lirien insisted, keeping her tone measured. "It's in a cave network. You kill either one of us, you'll never make it through alive." Vane's jaw clenched with frustration. Outside, a man screamed, a short, ugly sound that was silenced far too quickly. "We're leaving," he snapped. "All three of us. You lead me to the stone, or watch your Apache die 1 inch at a time. Your choice, Mrs. Wren." Lava. The word pulsed in the air, strange and sudden. It meant nothing. And yet it rattled something inside her. She didn't have time to think about why. "Fine," Lirien said, lowering her rifle ever so slightly. "I'll take you." Then her eyes flicked toward Theros, voice steady. "But first, I need to know if what you said about Edrin was true." Vane knew he held the upper hand. He played it slow. "Your husband found a woman and a boy holed up in a cave near the Eastern Canyon," he began. "He agreed to help them, for a price. When the woman couldn't pay, he kept the boy as leverage." "Adrin would never—" "Everyone's got a price, Mrs. Wren," Vane snapped, cutting her off. "For your man, it was gold. Just like the rest of us. He wasn't the first, won't be the last." She turned to Theros. His eyes held no judgment, only a silent plea. "Do you believe him?" Before she could speak, a war cry shattered the quiet, echoing just outside the cabin. Vane's attention snapped to the noise. His pistol drifted away from Theros's temple by a fraction. That was all Theros needed. He moved like lightning, one hand smashing the barrel aside, the other slamming upward into Vane's ribs. The gun went off, blasting a hole in the ceiling. The two men hit the floor in a brutal tangle. Lirien raised her rifle, but the chaos was too tight, too fast for a clean shot. Then she remembered the blade tucked in her boot, the curved karambit Theros had given her. She drew it, moved fast, circled them like a hunter. Vane was stronger than he looked, fueled by rage and desperation. He drove Theros hard into the wall, dazing him, and lunged for his fallen gun. Lirien didn't wait. She lunged. The karambit glinted in her fist as she struck, just the way Theros had shown her. She slashed downward, catching Vane's arm as he reached for the gun. The blade carved deep, severing muscle and tendon. Vayne screamed, more beast than man. His eyes locked onto her with murderous fury. "You'll die for that, woman!" he bellowed, staggering toward her. Lirien held her ground, blade ready, heart pounding. But Vayne never made it. Theros surged up from behind, slamming into him like a storm. They crashed into the table, splinters flying in every direction. When they rose, Theros had Vayne pinned, knife pressed to his throat. The turquoise pendant was gone, ripped clean from around the former officer's neck. "Your men are dying out there," Theros said, his voice low and final. "And you're next, unless you tell me the truth about my son." Vayne's eyes danced between the door and the blade. Finding no escape, a strange calm settled over him. Blood dripped from his arm as he spoke. "Truth is, your woman died protecting a secret that wasn't worth her life. There was no second child, no survivor. I made it all up to turn you two against each other. Looks like it damn near worked." Lirien saw the words land like a hammer. Theros didn't flinch, but his face twisted, like something inside him cracked. His knife pressed harder against Vayne's throat, drawing blood. "For that lie alone," Theros said, his voice gravel, "you should die." "Wait," Lirien said, breath catching. A memory flickered, Idrin's strange disappearances, his guarded answers. "The cave, was it real?" Vayne's eyes narrowed. "Eastern Canyon, 3 miles out. Your husband used it like a stash. That's where he hid the stone, and the rest of the treasures he kept from you." A crash outside. The front door burst open. Theros didn't move. He kept the blade at Vayne's throat, unmoving even as the Apache warriors stormed inside. 3 men entered, tall, imposing, painted for war. They carried old rifles and tomahawks, their faces hard as stone. They took in the scene in an instant. Lirien bloodied, Vayne trapped, Theros standing over him. And they said nothing. They didn't need to. The reckoning had arrived. Their eyes swept the room, measured glances shifting into reverence the moment they recognized their chief. "Theros," one of the warriors said in their native tongue, then broke into a rapid stream of Apache. Theros answered in kind, never once looking away from Garen Vayne. The others fanned out across the cabin, moving with quiet, deadly purpose, sealing every exit, every window, with trained precision. "Your men are dead," Theros said coldly, this time in English for Lirien Wren's sake. "My warriors tracked them from their camp, waited for the right time to strike. At last, fear cracked through Vayne's hardened mask. You can't just kill me," he stammered. "The army will come after you, all of you." "The army believes you died months ago," Theros replied. "A raid at the border, remember? No one goes looking for a dead man." Panic flared in Vayne's eyes. He turned to Lirien now, desperate. "Mrs. Wren, you're a Christian woman. You can't let them butcher me in cold blood." But Lirien could still see Edrin Vale dying alone while she was off chasing rumors. She remembered Theros' wife and child, slaughtered in their own home. 2 years of grief and hollow silence, all because of men like Garen Vayne. Her voice was quiet, but resolute. "My husband died because of your greed. I won't shed a single tear for you." Something in Vayne shifted then, fear draining into bitter resolve. "Then do it," he hissed at Theros. "Go ahead. Be the savage they all say you are. Show them everything they fear about your kind is true." Lirien saw Theros' jaw tighten. The blade at Vayne's throat dipped, drawing a thin line of blood. But then, to her surprise, he pulled it back. "Death's too easy," Theros muttered, his voice filled with disgust. "Too fast for a man like you." He barked something sharp in Apache. The warriors responded instantly, 2 of them grabbing Vayne, yanking his arms behind his back, and binding him tight. "What the hell are you doing?" Vane barked, voice rising as they dragged him towards the door. Theros bent and picked up the turquoise pendant from the floor, holding it to the light. "You came chasing sacred stones and stolen truths," he said. "Now you'll have a lifetime to reflect on them, from inside the walls you once used for torture." Realization dawned in Vane's face. Then sheer horror. "No, you can't. You wouldn't. That abandoned mine shaft," Theros continued, unmoved, "where you interrogated our people. It's deep enough that no one will hear you scream. We'll leave you food, water, just enough to keep you alive. Time enough to relive every life you stole." "That's murder!" Vane shouted, kicking and thrashing as they dragged him outside. "No," Theros said with finality. "That's justice." As the sound of Vane's protest faded into the dusty horizon, Lirien realized only Theros and one remaining warrior remained in the cabin. The other stood quietly near the door, waiting for orders. Lirien turned to Theros, unsure how to break the silence. "Your people came for you," she said gently. "They followed your trail?" "They knew something was wrong when I didn't return." Theros nodded. "They are loyal." The silence that followed was heavy, not hostile, but uncertain. The adrenaline had faded. With Vane gone, the strange thread that had pulled them together now frayed at the edges. "Was any of it true?" Lirien asked at last. "About Edrin? About your son?" Theros' features softened. "Garen Vane is a practiced liar," he said slowly. "He mixes truths with lies until you doubt even your own memories." "That's not an answer." Theros exhaled, an oddly human sound from a man who had seemed almost mythical through it all. "My son died in our village. That I know for certain. My wife died trying to protect him." But then he hesitated. "Senekai. She was born to white settlers," he admitted. "At 16 she chose our ways and never looked back. Her father cast her out. That part at least was true." Lirien took in his words, imagining a young woman who crossed impossible lines, culture, blood, tradition, for love, only to die defending the family she had built. "And Edrin?" she pressed. "The cave?" Theros asked, meeting her eyes directly. "Maybe your husband did find the stone there, like Vane said, hidden by others before him, but I don't believe he was the man Vane described." His voice was steady. "A man who builds a place like this, who walks softly on the land, that man doesn't sell out others for gold." His quiet faith in Edrin Vale cut deep, coming from someone who had every reason to despise settlers. "Thank you," she whispered. Theros gave a small nod, then turned to the warrior near the door and spoke quickly in Apache. The man nodded and slipped out, leaving them alone for the first time since the violence began. "My people will make sure Garen Vane never harms another soul," Theros said, gathering what few belongings he had. "They will also watch over you, until—" He paused. "Until you decide what comes next." And in that moment, Lirien realized he meant to leave, now that the danger had passed, now that justice was done. He was preparing to walk away. They were, after all, from worlds that had warred for generations. But the thought of returning to that lonely cabin, to silence after all they'd survived together, filled her with an ache she hadn't expected. "The stone," she murmured, not out of necessity, but to stall him just a moment longer. "What happens to it now?" Lirien asked quietly, her gaze fixed on the turquoise pendant Theros had picked up from Garen Vane. He turned it in his fingers. "This piece will be returned to my people, and the one your husband found." He looked to her, his meaning clear. Lirien crossed to the cabinet, opened a hidden drawer, and retrieved the polished blue stone she'd hidden away. Morning light spilled through the window, illuminating its deep hue, veins of darker blue twisting through it like river paths, maybe even maps to hidden gold. "It's yours," she said simply, holding it out to him. It always was. Theros accepted the stone with quiet reverence. As their fingers touched, a familiar warmth passed between them. No longer shocking, but grounding. Familiar. "Thank you," he said, voice low. Then, after a moment, "Lirien Wren, what will you do now?" It was the one question she hadn't dared ask herself. For 2 years, survival had been her only aim. Breathing, eating, existing after Edrin Vale's death had hollowed her life out. But now, with the storm past, and this man standing before her, she didn't know. "I don't know," she confessed. "This cabin is all I've got left." Theros studied her, long and quiet. Those dark eyes saw more than she said aloud. "There's a place," he said carefully, "where the mountains lean into the desert. No man claims it. Some of our people live there, the ones who walk between worlds, like my wife once did, like Senekai." Her heart skipped. "A small post was built there long ago, a place to trade, to survive." His voice wavered slightly, old pain still lingering in the corners. "It stands empty now, but the land is strong. Clean water runs through it. It would suit someone who belongs in both worlds, someone with courage and honor." Their eyes locked. And in his, Lirien saw something she hadn't dared let herself believe. Respect that had bloomed into something deeper. Not just admiration, but something personal. Something real. "Are you asking me to leave my home?" she asked softly, needing clarity. Theros shook his head. "I'm offering you a choice. To stay here with the ghosts of what you've lost, or to build something new. Somewhere you might find—" He hesitated, searched for the words. "Peace. Purpose. Maybe more." The air between them stilled. A proud Apache warrior, who had every right to hate settlers, was offering her a path. Maybe not into his tribe, not outright, but into something just as sacred. "What about your people?" Lirien whispered. "They won't accept a white woman living among them." "They accepted Senekai," Theros answered. "They'll accept anyone I—" He paused, then continued more measuredly. "Anyone whose actions prove their worth, like yours have." Lirien looked around the room. Every wooden beam, every shadowed corner whispered memories of Idrin, of the life they'd meant to share. But those memories now felt more like chains than comfort. A prison made of loss. "I need time," she said finally. "To think. To choose." Theros nodded, understanding flickering in his eyes. "Of course." He turned toward the door, where his warriors waited silently beyond. "I have duties to return to." He stepped into the doorway. Sunlight lit the side of his face, and then, from her heart to her lips, the words slipped out. "Will I see you again?" Theros turned back. "In 3 days," he said. "I'll return, for your answer, whatever it may be." He held her gaze for one long, unspoken beat, then turned and was gone. Through the window, Lirien watched him mount the horse his warriors had brought. His movements bore the strain of his wounds, but he rode tall, steady. Within seconds, the Apache melted back into the forest, vanishing like smoke on the wind. The cabin felt cavernous now. Echoes of the violence remained. Splintered furniture, streaks of blood, the lifeless body of Fenric Blade still crumpled near the door. Outside, Vane's men lay where they'd fallen. There'd be graves to dig, stories to tell, if the army came sniffing. But Lirien's thoughts drifted elsewhere, to Theris's words, to the offer he left behind like a seed in her chest. A new place, a new path, It both terrified her and lit a spark in her bones. She moved with purpose, cleaning the room with calm, deliberate motions, restoring what she could to order. But her mind circled the choice like a hawk, again and again. That night, she built a fire and sat alone before it. In her palm lay Edrin's wedding band, the one she'd taken from his hand 2 years ago. She'd held it like a talisman ever since. But tonight, it felt heavier than ever, and somehow lighter too. In the flickering firelight, the plain gold band shimmered softly in her hand. It spoke of a love once fierce and real, now long gone, yet still echoing in every corner of her soul. "What would you want me to do, Edrin?" Lirien whispered into the silence. Of course there was no reply, just the steady crackle of flame and her own breath. But then, her dream returned. Edrin pointing somewhere beyond her vision, saying it was time to find her way home. And maybe, just maybe, he hadn't meant this cabin, these walls and beams and memories, but something deeper. A home born not of timber, but of belonging, of purpose, of love. The thought brought tears, not the bitter kind she'd grown used to, but something else, something cleaner, a release. For the first time since Edrin Vale's death, Lirien mourned him not as a widow holding on to grief like a shield, but as a woman ready to let go, to face the future with open eyes. When morning light crept over the hills, she knew what needed doing. The Eastern Canyon, just as Garen Vane had described it, was a raw wound in the land, a jagged cut 3 miles from the cabin, rising steep and sharp against the winter blue sky. Lirien rode at first light, her rifle across her saddle, eyes alert. She followed deer tracks and worn trails through the pine groves until the woods gave way to stone. Rocky badlands stretched out before her. Finding the cave was slow work. The canyon wall was riddled with hollowed-out cracks and dead ends. Frustration gnawed at her resolve by midday. Then she saw it. A narrow opening, half blocked by a fallen rock, just tall enough for a man to crawl through. She dismounted, tied her horse to a twisted juniper, and crept toward the dark mouth of the cave with her rifle ready. It was cool inside. Still. Dust clung to her boots, and something else lingered, the faint, ghostly scent of old smoke. Edrin, she breathed, and she knew. This was where he'd come during those secretive final days. The tunnel narrowed briefly, then opened into a small chamber. Thin shafts of daylight pierced through cracks above. Her breath hitched. A stone-ringed fire pit, a rough shelf carved into the wall. Firewood stacked with care. Someone had lived here, or hid here. And then, tucked behind a rocky outcrop, she found it. A bundle wrapped in old oilskin. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped it. A child's tiny moccasin, adorned with fading beads. A wooden toy horse, carved by hand, lovingly, patiently. And a small deerskin pouch, exactly like the one Theros carried. Inside, a lock of black hair, bound in sinew. Lirien sank to her knees. It hit her all at once. Garen had lied, just as Theros had said. Twisted the truth with enough facts to plant doubt. But Edrin hadn't been holding anyone for ransom. He'd been protecting someone. Senekai and her child. Maybe they'd escaped. Maybe they hadn't. But one truth rang clear as a bell. Edrin had died trying to shield them. He'd been the man she believed in, until the end. Tears poured freely as she rewrapped the bundle, her heart steady. These weren't just trinkets. They were part of Theros' bloodline, his legacy, and they deserved to go home. She stepped out into the blinding sunlight. The weight in her chest had eased, as if something she hadn't even realized she carried had finally lifted. Edren had died with honor, and she'd carry his memory that same way. As she mounted her horse and turned back towards the cabin, Lirien's decision came into focus. No more doubt. 3 days would fly. She'd be ready. The morning of the third day arrived crisp and cold. Frost laced the grass. The sky stretched blue and endless overhead. Lirien had spent the days sorting through everything she owned, deciding what would come and what she'd leave behind. The cabin? It would go back to the land. Let the wind and time erase what pain had been buried there. She had just fastened the last bundle to her horse when a rustle in the trees caught her eye. He appeared from the shadows, alone this time, riding the same gray horse as before. Her heart leapt. Theros. He sat tall in the saddle, his black hair catching fire in the sunlight. His face was unreadable, but there was hope behind the steel. He stopped several paces away, eyes flicking from her horse to the shuttered windows behind her. Understanding dawned in his gaze. But still he asked, "You've made your choice?" Lirien nodded, throat thick with emotion. "I found the cave," she said softly. "I found proof that Edren was helping your wife and child, hiding them, keeping them safe." His expression faltered, just for a second. Hope, sorrow, doubt, all at once. "Show me," he said. Lirien reached into her saddlebag and drew out the bundle. With care, she unwrapped it, revealing the moccasin, the wooden horse, the lock of hair. Theros swung down from his horse in one smooth motion, approaching slowly, almost reverently, as though afraid the moment might vanish. When he reached her, his hands hovered, shaking slightly, as he reached toward the past. "These were my sons," Theros said, his voice rough with memory. He ran his fingers gently over the wooden horse. "I carved this for his second birthday." "And this?" Lirien asked softly, nodding to the small deerskin pouch holding the lock of hair. "Among our people, when a child receives their true name, a piece of their hair is cut and kept," he explained. "Senekai carried it always. It's a symbol of his spirit." His fingers lingered on the pouch like it held his very soul. "I thought it gone forever." "They were hidden in the cave," Lirien said gently. "Tucked away with care, like someone planned to come back for them." For a heartbeat, raw hope flared in Theros's eyes, quickly checked, but not extinguished, the guarded look of a man too familiar with loss to welcome miracles. "It means they made it there. They survived past the attack on our village." He looked at her, true gratitude breaking through his features. "And it means your husband. He truly was the man I believed he was." Lirien gave a slow nod, her voice hushed with conviction. "Yes, he was." Theros rewrapped the bundle with reverence, tucking it into his saddlebag with care. When he turned back, the tremor in his expression had steadied, but his eyes still held the depth of what had passed between them. "And now?" he asked, glancing at her packed horse, her shuttered cabin. "What path have you chosen, Lirien Wren?" She drew a breath, steady and full. Her choice had already taken root deep in her chest. "I'm leaving this place. There's nothing left here but echoes and pain." A flicker of something passed over Tharos's face. Regret, maybe, but it vanished quickly. "The settlement south of here would welcome you," he began, but she raised a hand. "That's not where I'm headed." She stepped in, closing the distance between them until she could see the gold in his dark eyes, the quiet strength behind them. "You told me once of a place, on the edge of your land, a trading post, a place where someone caught between two worlds might find purpose." Hope stirred in Theros's gaze. Wary still, but real. It's 3 days from here, harsh land, but it's honest, and beautiful in its own way. Then it's the right kind of place for me, Lirien said. She thought of everything she'd lost, and all she'd discovered about herself in these few days. I'm stronger than I thought, strong enough to start again. The question hung between them like a breath not yet spoken. Was she going alone? Or was she walking toward what he'd offered her, wordlessly but fully? With a courage born of fire and grief, she reached for his hand. His touch was warm, weathered from a warrior's life, but gentle. That same quiet current between them surged again, not frightening now, but comforting. I want to see that place, she said quietly. With you. If you'll take me there. Theros's fingers closed around hers, and the smile that came was unlike any he'd ever shown her. Warm, whole, filled with a promise. It would be my honor, he said, voice softer than she'd ever heard it. The road won't be easy. The best ones never are, Lirien replied with a hint of a smile. His smile deepened. That's true. Then he added, but when you don't walk them alone, the miles feel lighter. No one spoke of love. It was too soon, too raw, but something had begun, rooted in shared struggle, in scars seen and unseen, in the quiet knowing of two people who'd lost nearly everything, and still had the grit to hope. Lirien mounted her horse, casting one final glance at the cabin behind her. That place had held her, broken her, and somehow freed her. I'm ready, she said, and turned her back to the past. Side by side, they rode into the wintry light, two silhouettes in motion, perfectly in step. The cabin faded behind them, a ghost of another life. Ahead, the trail stretched wild and unknown, unforgiving, perhaps, but wide open with possibility. As they reached the tree line, Theros spoke, voice steady and low. Among my people, there's a saying, when the heart has known deep sorrow, it becomes strong enough to carry deep joy. Lirien let the words settle. They felt right. Then I suppose I'm ready to test that, she said. His smile was like morning sun climbing over the peaks, bold and full of promise. So am I. And with that, they vanished into the forest, leaving behind only hoof prints that the next snow would erase. A warrior and a widow, two worlds once divided, now bridged by pain, strength, and the fragile thread of hope. Somewhere in the distance, if one looked closely, a few sharp-eyed Apache riders watched from a ridge, silent sentinels ensuring their leader's path remained clear. But no one saw the quiet gesture, the way her hand reached out and his met it without hesitation. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows ahead of them as they rode westward, toward Violet Mountains, a forgotten outpost waiting for life again, and the wild, unwritten future where healing might finally match the sorrow they'd both carried. And for the first time in longer than she could recall, Lirien Wren felt truly, undeniably alive. 6 months had passed, and the trading post looked nothing like the forgotten ruin it once was. The adobe and timber shell had been reborn, fresh whitewash glowing in the amber light of the Arizona dusk, a vegetable patch thriving near the front, and a hand-built corral snug behind the main structure. Over the door hung a sign, painted in both English and Apache script, Peaceful Crossing Trading Post. Inside, Lirien Wren was arranging new supplies on sturdy shelves, crafted by Theros himself. The last half-year hadn't been easy. Restoring the abandoned post had taken grit, sleepless nights, and relentless determination. Building trust between native traders and white settlers had taken even more. Tensions still simmered all around them, but somehow they'd carved out something real. exactly what Theros had once envisioned. A place that didn't belong solely to one world or the other, but something between. A crossroads. Apache hunters could trade pelts and handmade goods. Settlers could buy supplies and leave with respect. And perhaps, just maybe, the first fragile shoots of understanding were taking root in a land long scorched by prejudice and pain. But beyond all that, something even more unlikely had taken root. Between Lirien and Theros, what had started as respect forged in fire had become partnership. Then something deeper, something neither of them had dared to hope for again. Love. Steady, quiet, earned. Hoofbeats echoed through the canyon as Theros returned from a hunt. Lirien stepped out onto the porch, hand shielding her eyes from the burnished sunset. He rode with the same wild grace that had first captured her breath months ago. But now, his presence brought joy, not fear. "A good hunt?" she called as he swung down from his horse. His smile said it all. In the months since they'd left the cabin behind, that smile had begun to bloom more often, softening the edges of his hardened face in a way that made Lirien's heart ache. "Enough to share," he answered, tying off his reins. "For any who come seeking shelter." "3 families showed up while you were gone," she said. "Apache from the northern bands. They heard this was a safe place." Peaceful Crossing had earned a quiet reputation. Refuge for those caught in the storm between clashing worlds. Theros's name alone was enough to assure Apache visitors they'd be welcome. Lirien's presence gave settlers the same comfort. It wasn't perfect. White militiamen still muttered slurs about the Apache woman who ran the place. And among Theros's people, some elders frowned at how close he stood to a white woman. But together, they held fast. Together, they proved a different path could exist. As Theros approached her, Lirien still felt that same flutter low in her chest. Half a year hadn't dulled it. If anything, it had only grown stronger, fed by every storm they weathered side by side, every wordless night shared by firelight, every boundary they chose to break. "You got a letter from the fort," he noted, nodding toward the open envelope on the counter. "Yes. The new Indian agent wants to meet," Lirien replied. "He's heard about us. Thinks this place might serve as a model for other territories." Theros's brow furrowed. "An ally? Or another Garen Vane?" Lirien didn't flinch. "We'll find out. Together." Gone was the frightened widow who once cowered behind locked doors. In her place stood a woman of quiet steel, shaped by fire and choice, who could now face uncertain futures with unwavering eyes. As the sun dropped behind the jagged ridgeline, they walked to their favorite spot, a plain bench overlooking the valley below, right where the last golden light of the day spilled across the earth. It had become their ritual, their moment to breathe, to speak, to simply sit and remember why they kept fighting for something better. As they sat, Lirien turned slightly, her tone softer. "There's something else. Something I haven't told you." Theros glanced at her, a single brow lifting. "Important?" "The most." She took his hand, warm and calloused, and laid it gently on her belly. Still flat, but carrying a secret she'd confirmed just that morning. It took him a moment. Then his eyes widened, not with fear, but wonder. "You're sure?" he asked, voice thick, almost trembling. Lirien nodded, her own joy threatening to spill over. "A new life, a life from both our worlds." Theros pulled her into his arms with rare tenderness, burying his face in her hair. He held her long and close, breath shaking, pride and emotion breaking through the quiet armor he usually wore. When he finally leaned back, his cheeks were wet, and he didn't wipe the tears away. "My people believe," he said quietly, "that children born of great love carry great strength. They are the bridge between what was and what might be." "I believe that too," Lirien whispered. "This child will know every part of who they are and be proud of all of it." As the sky darkened and stars began to bloom, they stayed on that bench, speaking not only of their child, but of the world they were trying to help shape. A future where peace wasn't just a dream whispered on the wind. A future where people didn't have to choose between love and belonging. A future where children like theirs could grow without hiding any part of themselves. It was bold. It was dangerous. Some would say impossible, but as Lirien leaned her head on Tharos's shoulder, his arm drawing her close, their child between them, she believed in it with every part of her soul. They had both survived more than most could bear. They had rebuilt not just a trading post, but a reason to hope again. And now, they were no longer walking between two worlds. They were building a new one, together. Even after everything they'd lost, they were building something new, something that defied the odds. If healing could take root in their lives, maybe there was hope for the land too. "What's on your mind?" Tharos asked, his fingers gently threading through her hair. Lirien Wren smiled softly into the night. "Just thinking how maybe the most feared warrior and the most stubborn widow were exactly what this land needed, even if it's just to change one small corner of it." Tharos let out a quiet laugh, genuine, unguarded, a sound she'd come to cherish more than she ever thought possible. She knew now how rare that laugh had been before they found one another. As the stars blinked awake above them, they remained on their old wooden bench, two souls who had outrun grief, outlasted prejudice, and stumbled into something extraordinary. Love, resurrected in the unlikeliest of places. Healing, rising from scars so deep they were once thought permanent. They'd discovered a truth most folks never lived long enough to understand. That home wasn't a roof or a place on a map. Home was found in the arms of someone who saw all of you and stayed. And as night fell over Peaceful Crossing, that feeling of home wrapped itself around them like a warm, unspoken vow. It lived in the hush between words, in the soft weight of the child growing inside her, in the stubborn hope that even here, in the harshest soil, a new future could bloom. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for riding with us today. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully, only to support production, while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.